I'm out of jail, and I'm never going back again. Never selling heroin, never selling crack again. Don't work for the government, coke packaging. Don't fire industry.
What's up, PRISONPENN? I'm with Immortal Technique right now. We're in front of Grant's tomb. You relate prison to slavery. You have roots in slavery. You see that a lot of manufacturing of army helmets and weapons are made by prisoners.
Absolutely.
And
well, that's the only reason it really says Made in America.
Right.
That's the only way they can afford to make it say Made in America.
Right.
When you press up, you know, oh, I want 6 million shirts. Okay, you know, the price to get that done in America outside of a prison is very different than it would be to have it done in China, Taiwan, or India, Singapore, wherever. The problem is how you gonna wear a United States Marine uniform and have that shit say made in China.
Right.
You know what I mean? That doesn't even make sense. So they have people in prison that they pay $1 a day, if that, to get that shirt done for the military. Now they have people at call centers and all this extracurricular shit. So I'm looking at it like, not only are they shutting out the American worker, which is, you know, they're the last people that are shutting out the American worker. I'm saying there are a million other companies that do that, but I think not only are they doing it from a business standpoint, but they're also setting up their own little de facto colony within the confines of America.
Right.
You know, and I think people forget what the word colony means. It comes from the Roman coloni, when the aristocrat would have the people who worked his land or worked a certain area of land, and that particular area would have to give half of its earnings to the master, and then only the rest of y'all niggas learn to live on.
Right, right. What do you think about the Rockefeller laws? The fact that since 1980, prison population has quadrupled. Crack versus cocaine being, you know, that's a racist law, clearly. 70% of prisoners in America are non-whites. What do you think about all that?
I think that people are making so much money off of this, they're not thinking about how to fix it. You know, that there's no clear strategy from people that are in command of this country. I think that it's sad because I've seen people's lives be destroyed all over this country, even by a law like 3 strikes, you know, over the criminalization of marijuana.
Right.
You know, you get caught with some weed, you had 2 strikes, now you're going to jail for 20 dumb years. You're doing football numbers for weed. And I'm like, mind you, I've been locked up, so I know that there are certain people that I would never want as my next door neighbor.
Okay.
You know, I've been locked up around murderers, rapists, child molesters. When you see these people, and I hate to even use that term, these people, as if they're not people, they're people. When I see people like that, at first, when I was young and I was incarcerated, I would really put the fear of God into these people. Like, yo, you know what? You're not going to be anywhere near me, you know? And I had a selective morality as a child, where I would be there with drug dealers and someone who killed somebody, or somebody who was convicted of manslaughter, for all intents and purposes a murderer. But to me, they were someone who I would at least look at and be like, all right, well, you know what? You're not a rapist. Right. You're not a child molester. Right. Until I realized that most people who do those type of crimes are probably people who've had that done to them at some point. Which is where my mind started changing, and I'm like, yo, you know what? The majority of these people are individuals who are just repeating a cycle, and it's disgusting. And the problem is that we're not addressing that in what we do in prisons, you know what I mean? We're not addressing the kid who grows up without a father, that has no father figure, and therefore sees the image of strength as displaying violence. A child who grows up with poor impulse control. A child who doesn't know anything about the economy other than how to bag grams, you know? But yet understands mathematics and understands distribution at a Wharton Business School level, you know? And I think that when I saw these things, and I imagined them transpiring not just in that small microcosm, that little petri dish of society inside prison, but when I saw them as a whole for what they meant in American society, I imagine that if this continued and that people really that had the power to change it didn't, that they would one day be held in a similar situation. And I'm not saying physically, but I'm saying spiritually and psychologically.
Right.
Because when you get out of prison, that doesn't mean you're free.
Right. You relate yourself to W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Mumia.
In what way do you relate to them?
Well, I mean, I think W.E.B. Du Bois was an educator. He was someone who wanted to better the conditions of people of color in the United States of America. And he wrote an incredible book, Souls of Black Folks. And when I read it while I was incarcerated, it was one of the many books I read, it really opened my mind. You know, I read some literature by Mumia while I was incarcerated. And then, of course, I'm from Harlem. I always knew who Marcus Garvey was. I always know who W.E.B. Du Bois was as well, but I hadn't read as much of his work extensively. In terms of Mumia, I was inspired by someone like him because he's been fighting a lifelong battle against the system, not just, you know, as an inmate incarcerated unjustly, but as a person who, even before he was incarcerated, was making moves to expose the system for what it was, to expose the racist Philadelphia Police Department, to expose disproportionate living within society, to expose economic hardship among a certain class of people that are completely ignored by mainstream America. And what's important about that is that he wasn't just about black people at that point. You know, John Africa's movement included so many different other races of people, and said, look, if they're willing to do this to black people and white Americans are willing to stand idly by, then don't you think at some point it could happen to you?
Right.
And I think that's what we're desensitized to. You know, if we see urban warfare overseas and we say, oh, those people are just terrorists. Well, what happened if one day they say that they're terrorists in America and they do that here? Then in your mind, automatically you think, okay, well, it's all right to do that because they're such, you know, they're desensitizing Americans by doing things. We're going to lock up a huge percent of our population. Oh, well, we've done it. That seems logical. Where in other countries, people would think that's ridiculous. You know, you really have millions of people incarcerated. What is that doing for your nation? What is that doing for your country? You know, it's not reforming them. They're not going to get out of jail like, oh, hey, you know, those 5 extra years really made the difference. Right. You know, I was only going to do 10 and I wasn't going to learn anything. Right. You know, I was going to go back to robbing, stealing, and killing. But now, since I did 15 years instead of 10, that's the big difference for me.
I wrote this for Mumia, stuck in the beast, for people who march in the streets and struggle for peace, for hood niggas born rugged, never rockin' Versace, Eddie Ramirez, cousin George, and my old friend Sashi, Chris from the block, and all my niggas stuck in the cell. Paul Wolfowitz, motherfucker, I'll see you in hell. My destiny's to show the world that the music is real. Go back in time and play this shit for the slaves in the field, and for my children in the future that are waiting to breathe. People slowly dying, hanging on, waiting to leave. Believe when I'm gone and this album's on a library shelf, I'll be one with God and one with you and everything else.